There we go, and welcome everyone, and jumping on for what is a conversation I have been desperate for, absolutely desperate to have. How are you, my friend? Are you doing good?
Doing well today. Doing well. How are
Doing well
you?
today. Well, I've got a bit of a gripe. You weren't at work today, but as it turns out, I was. So there was me slavering away, and then there's you, sort of living the life of luxury and so on. But thank you ever so much for
Yeah.
jumping on this. You have got a very interesting story, collection of stories really, and also opinions and views, which I guess a lot of people are now starting to come round to, but obviously we still have those that hugely disagree with you entirely.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of which, with you and your haters and all that, now I know the sort of things that people get called when they have your persuasion and all that. And as I look at you, you don't look like a Nazi to me, mate. You look
Do I not?
what I was expecting a Nazi to look like. So what's going on there, mate?
I mean, all those buzzwords, far right extremists. I'm guessing part of it. I mean, it validates my existence. Far right extremist, bigoted, fascist, Nazi.
All on your headstone, mate. That's what it's going to be. It's like,
yeah, I'm just
nice guy. Yeah.
Might as well tattoo myself with a whole load of those. Yeah,
why not?
Just,
but you have to allow for extra room for all the extra words that they create after however long, you just so you can keep adding to it, like Islamophobe and so on like that. Just keep adding.
Islamophobe. Yeah.
That's the one.
All right. Extreme right.
Now, so let's touch upon, before we go into all the nuts and bolts of where we are in terms of Western society and whether it's the downfall of Western society, who knows, or whether this is the rebirth, perhaps. Let's talk about you more, because I think people really should get to know yourself a little bit more than perhaps they do. So, Tamer, I know about Hong Kong. So however you want to delve into your past, and happy to talk about, then let me know. So tell me about your upbringing.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in Hong Kong. So for you viewers, for those of you who don't know, Hong Kong was part of the British Empire. It was a British colony. And you can do your research into the history. But very quickly, Hong Kong came out of a kind of a tension between Britain, the British Empire, and China. During the 1800s, they went in with trading, commerce and trading goods. And it was to do with silver and other types of resources, until they came into conflict because the British ran out of silver to trade for the Chinese. They started smuggling in silver from the Chinese black market and was selling back opium to the Chinese black market as well, which that's why they call it the Opium Wars. It's a really interesting part of history. It's really kind of scumbaggery on the part of the British. But and so a number of peace treaties were signed. China basically said that let's just keep the trade going as long as you can keep a chunk of land, and that would be Hong Kong. And subsequently, Hong Kong was part of the British Empire. It was colonized for 99 years under the British, from 1898 until 1997. 1997 was when Margaret.
I still remember in 1997. I remember because I'm old. I remember on the news watching the handing over of Hong Kong.
Margaret Thatcher, and she went to China to sign the 50-year deal. But yeah, it's a really interesting part of history. But except for there were 5 years between 1940 and 45 when it was colonized by the Japanese. Hong Kong was annexed by the Japanese. They took it over, which is during the Japanese imperial empire. It was a very bloody part of history. But so when Hong Kong was handed over back to China, Margaret Thatcher signed a treaty that guaranteed Hong Kong would retain its liberal society, its kind of parliamentary laws. There's a certain kind of parliamentary system in Hong Kong. It's sort of similar to the British Parliament. It's universal suffrage, voting rights, democracy, and all of that, all the liberal stuff that goes along with kind of a democratized society. They would keep it for 50 years until 2047 before it is officially it officially becomes part of China. It's consumed by China, and nobody really knows what happens to Hong Kong post 2047. That depends on what the CCP will do, and whether
Well,
China
absolutely. I'm
survives
guessing
through
the reason that Hong Kong
the
was as liberal as it kind of was because of the influence of the British there during that
was
time.
the direct influence of
Yes.
the fatherly leadership of the British Empire. So I think Hong Kong is very kind of a positive example of what the British Empire represents. In some areas of the world, it didn't. For example, South Africa, maybe, or some other parts. But yeah, Hong Kong had a really good relationship with Britain, and so I was. So obviously, Hong Kong is kind of a black sheep, in terms of kind of international reputations, uh, in the kind of general scheme of things. But I was actually born and raised in an international school, what they call an international school curriculum.
Right.
My mother and father, they worked their socks off to afford me and my brother to be able to be educated in a kind of international school environment. And it was actually it was called the English Schools Foundation in Hong Kong. So it was a collection of schools and academies that followed the traditional British school teaching style system. The curriculum was focused on not really the teacher in the middle or the lecturer sits in the middle lecturing in front of students. It's all about there's a kind of a two-way reciprocal relationship between the classroom and the teacher. There's dialogue, there's interaction in the classroom. Students actually participate in the classroom activities, whichever subject it is, maths, English. And we were taught, it was really good. It was kind of quite high level type of education, I'd say, quite high quality education. I have a lot of gratitude for my mum and dad for, they were traders, I think, back in the day. They worked for some company. I think it was either Morgan Stanley or something to do with Lehman Brothers, pre 2008, something to do with Lehman Brothers. I'm still not really sure what they actually did.
And they thought that the best thing for you guys would be to go to this school as opposed to a different.
Yeah, as opposed to public schools, the public sort of government subsidized school system was really quite crap. It was really kind of a factory based, kind of just like every other school in the world, really. It's kind of a lot of the curriculum is budgeted and all that. So I was my first language is English. In fact, it's the only language I speak. I was educated all my life through primary and secondary school in English, and as I said, I had a really good relationship with most of my teachers.
I like the word
fact
most.
That most of my teachers. Considering the fact that I was actually a very naughty child, I was a really, really troublemaker, kind of naughty kid, and just to be a bit self-flagellating, all naughty children are intelligent. I'm going to say that. I will say that.
First, folks, you heard it here. They're just desperate to just be understood. That's all it is.
Well, I mean, it's true. But I caused a lot of trouble back in my school years. I remember in year 4 in primary school, I almost got kicked out of my school because I was pissing off my teacher. I mean, he just about tolerated my day-to-day behavior in classroom. Almost set. I remember in secondary school, I almost set a chemistry lab on fire. I lit a match and threw it into a glass jug full of ethanol, which is
that'll do it. Yeah. But, so what happened? I'm assuming it was very strong words with the parents, was it?
Yeah, there was a faculty meeting with my parents and stuff. Nothing came about it. Like there was no fire or anything, but yeah, it was really bad. But
this school that you went to, was it also kind of like an international school? So you had people from different places, or were they primarily?
Yeah, it was. I call it a British school, but in essence, it was quite internationally based. They would allow students from all sorts of backgrounds, ethnicities. There are all sorts of skin colors, and people from different cultures. It's sort of like the what's the name of that school in London? That woman who came on Dan Wootton show. I
Or
forgot.
was
The
it like the
Michaela School.
Montesano's? Yeah, the case. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
the
know.
Michaela, sort of like that, but it wasn't as secular. So the Michaela School is very, they teach you a lot of secular, in a kind of secular fashion. Back then, we did learn about sort of history, World War One and Two. We learned about Christianity and different religions and stuff, but religion wasn't really instilled inside our school curriculum. Theology and all that, and spirituality, philosophy, it wasn't really embedded in our um, school curriculum, nor in Hong Kong culture. Hong Kong culture is quite secular in a way. My family weren't really raised, they didn't raise me at least, or my brother in a kind of religious, theological fashion. It was all very kind of liberal, live and let live. You're free to do whatever you want.
Being a good human, I would imagine, just simple as that.
Yeah, just simply just be a good human and treat others as you wish to be treated. But yeah, in terms of the international kind of essence of our school curriculum, there were white kids, there were ginger kids, there were black kids, there were brown kids, there were the local Chinese Hong Kong kids as well. I never saw people their character, their personality, and base it off of their ethnicity. I never really actually understood. As kids, we're innocent. I was raised in that kind of environment. I never saw people as I never differentiated people in terms of color or really kind of religious or cultural, ethnicity related backgrounds. I had kind of one of those puppy love moments with girls and girls, vice versa, girls with boys. You'd see white kids having relationships with Asian kids and vice versa. I had interest in a ginger lady once. Another I had was a half Filipino, half Hong Kong Chinese. My first girlfriend in secondary school, she was half Filipino, half Hong Kong Chinese as well. So yeah, back then Hong Kong was a really kind of big and bustling city. It's what you would call not really a high trust society, but a functioning society. Capitalism. Hong Kong really does represent that kind of free market capitalist society. Things are efficient. Public transport runs well. If there are issues, they get fixed within 24 hours. Unlike in Britain, it takes 1,000 gazillion years for roadworks to be completed.
A supposed, top 7 nation or something like that, and we can't even get a road sorted out, let alone anything else. So
exactly.
But just out of curiosity, just as a quick side note, only because of my own ignorance and whatnot, Hong Kong, or the idea of Hong Kong, how does that sort of relate to Taiwan as well? Because obviously there's tensions with that as well. Are they similar?
I can't really comment on that. Not because I don't know it, but I'm not really. It's not really part of my area of study. But I do know what.
Yeah,
I do know what Taiwan represents. I do know the history of Taiwan as well. It's they had relationships with the Chinese Communist Party, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
But Taiwan is an official country. Taiwan is a country, even though China doesn't recognize that. Even the Olympics don't recognize that, but it is officially a nation state. Whereas Hong Kong, it's not. It's really a city. It's a financial hub, and it's an asset of China. We can go into the politics of it if you want, maybe later. But yeah, my background is raised in kind of an English speaking school environment. I have a lot of gratitude to the people involved in the school curriculum, my parents as well. My favorite one of my favorite authors was Roald Dahl. I love Roald Dahl. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach, The Witches. And then when I got into secondary school, late primary school, I started reading Anthony Horowitz, really good writer. Darren Shan, he's an Irish writer. He writes about vampires and demons and all that stuff. And I was always really interested in stories. I think what our school curriculum really taught us was to engage in compelling story writing and storytelling. I took a lot of interest in English, sort of English literature. We studied Shakespeare, so I took an interest in kind of Romeo and Juliet. They taught us about Macbeth, and there were different themes that were introduced in the kind of study of Shakespeare's works. And then later in secondary school, I took, well, all of us took GCSEs. So it follows the pattern of a British system. And actually, my school education system is far more advanced than the current school model in Britain right now. So it's, yeah, really quite odd.
So when you was in this,
roll
when you
forward.
was growing up and in Hong Kong, and obviously with the school and all that, what sort of impressions were you being given on, I suppose, Britain, and also, I suppose, China as well, because of that's where you know where you were. Were you sort of being given impressions of what these nations were like or their people were like?
Yeah, so we weren't actually not really taught that much on Chinese history, whether it's to do with retaining a certain political narrative within the whole education board. They didn't want us to know about the evils of the Chinese Communist Party, and maybe it might be a bit. They taught us about Nazi Germany. They taught us about World War One and the causes and what started it, but they never taught us about China, which I thought was quite disappointing. So I never really officially learned about China or any of Hong Kong's beginnings through my school system. I had to learn it all by myself when I reached the age of 18. In fact, when I came to London, that's when I came to the UK. When I moved to London, that's when I learned. I had to teach myself about China. But as for Britain, I think in primary school they did kind of teach us the history of British industry, the Industrial Revolution, and all that jazz, and it flows through English literature as well. You know, the stories that we were taught about, you know, Shakespeare and all that. But I think when I got into secondary school, I'm just talking about things in retrospect, because at the time when you're young, you don't realize. But it was in secondary school that I found that there was a pattern that emerged in our school system, in the way that they were teaching us, that somehow there is something that is fundamentally flawed about Western societies, particularly about America and the British Empire. Even in late primary school, in year 6, I was taught that what the British Empire did to India was horrible. They caused mass famines and genocides, and this gave rise to Mahatma Gandhi. And by the way, Gandhi is he's a kind of a terrorist, I will say. You know, history is written by the victors, actually. So, you know, just a note for everyone. It's not all black and white. You know, Gandhi was not some peace loving. He's not all peace loving, just for argument's sake. But yeah, they taught us about South Africa as well. You know, the apartheid state, and how Nelson Mandela was kind of framed him as a kind of a war hero, even though he's a terrorist as well, in actual fact. But yeah, it was kind of, it wasn't really, it wasn't, I don't think it was, we were indoctrinated, but it was instilled in us. There was something kind of flawed about the Western society, but at the same time, there was, you know, you had to kind of appreciate other cultures or other societies that built great civilizations, like India, like South Africa, that challenged what they would call the oppressors at the time, being the British Empire or whatever white nation. So that I believe during my school years, there was that transitioning from traditional liberal education to a more kind of critical theory based, and we can talk about critical theory later if you want. But critical theory is very interesting. That's kind of a critical theory. That's the transitionary phase into critical theory based education of challenging the suppositions that Western civilization is so mighty and good and virtuous and all that. It's kind of that's when the topsy-turvy world that we now live in started to emerge. It was back in the early 2000s.
Well, in all fairness,
they educated
we're being
us.
reminded all the time that, you know, well, we should be paying our reparations for everything that happened in the past and so on, even though it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with us whatsoever. And I always find this funny because I always liken this to the Monty Python Holy Grail kind of film of what did the Romans ever do for us? But for us, it's what did the British Empire ever to do us? Well, they brought in democracy. Yeah, well, there is that. But what did they ever do for, and it just keeps going on and on, because what they also forget is, or they try and twist it, is that yes, there were a lot of things that happened that shouldn't have happened. And I don't think anyone is going to be able to sit here and say, no, we were completely, white clean all the way through. There were a lot of things that were incorrect, but there were also a lot of advancements that were made in all these places. And I mean, if we take India, for example, you only have to look at some of these people who are doing almost like where they're just traveling to India and they're just walking around with the cameras and things like that. And you see all these kind of ornate buildings and these palaces, almost like palaces, but large stately homes and then all that.
Temples.
Yeah, clearly at some point were obviously made during the empire and there would have been, opulent and so on. And now they're just covered in fences and just overgrown and everything. And it's kind of like, well, you've had the keys to the castle for however long, and this is what you've just let happen to it. Everything's just gone to shit, basically. And so I do find it a little bit hypocritical when they say, well, they did horrible things. Okay, well, how is your, democracy going? How is your medicine going? How is your sanitation going? How is it like? Are you still enjoying that, or do you want to give all that up? Because
exactly,
brought with you. I just find that amazing, and it's also something you said there, which I think kind of mirrors in my head, is when you said that they were kind of putting across the idea that the West is fundamentally broken and it comes with its essential evils as such. Because look at the empires and whatnot. You could say that's the same with the schools in the West at the minute, who are teaching this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the transitioning from traditional liberal education to critical theory based education. But back in the days, I mean, all empires, all civilizations did a certain amount of evil.
Yes.
Nobody's exempt. Nobody was especially virtuous. I mean, even the Roman Catholic Church fell into corruption, and that birthed the Protestant Reformation. There's a reason for everything. But yeah, on the whole, the British Empire did more good for the world than any other empire, I suppose. I mean, even the Spanish and the Portuguese, the Dutch, they were particularly what you would call mercantilistic. They'd kind of, especially Spain and Portugal, they'd go to a piece of land or a country, they'd sort of dig for resources, dig for gold, and then take it back for, personal use. They never really invested. In some ways they did invest, but in most cases they didn't really invest in the infrastructure of the land. Whereas the British Empire, they did things very differently. They actually did more to, in some cases, well, in most cases actually, they worked to preserve a lot of the cultures and traditions that they colonized. India being a good example, and a lot of other countries. But and that's why the British Museum exists. It's to preserve all of these, sculptures and works of art that people can appreciate. If you returned it back for the sake of reparation, if you returned it back to their source, they'd just be, I don't know, either knocked down or someone would steal it. I mean, back in the days,
all you hear is like, these are stolen items. They should be returned to where they come from. We all look after it. I'm sure you will. And back pocket. There we go. But the thing is, right, listening to you going through that sort of upbringing, despite the fact that you had these kind of thoughts, these teachings of what the Western societies are like, you've still managed to come to a mindset that falls very much aligning with the West. So it's interesting that despite these influences, you still carried on regardless with your own.
Yeah, I think with my secondary school system, they were trying to juggle in between that. They were struggling between that kind of defending the West and opposing the West. There was a bit of a struggle and a tension, especially when it comes to teaching people about South Africa and India. But yeah, on the whole, we kind of, it was instilled in us in primary school that, you know, there's a kind of understanding that, you know, we all speak English, we all, you know, learn from the bottom up, and that, you know, a lot of these things that we're used to, or resources that we rely upon, and advancements that are made to benefit society as a whole, came from Western liberal mindsets, liberal thinking. And yeah, I was always most of us in school, we were taught to be kind of more adventurous. We were taught to kind of think with an open mind about things, and to develop critical thinking skills. Do you know what AYP Duke of Edinburgh is? The Duke of Edinburgh. It's like an expeditionary kind of program. There's like AYP Silver and Gold. They have it in all Commonwealth countries, but in
Oh,
Hong
right.
Kong, we would be sent to expeditions to test our navigation skills, geography, and we would go on a hiking expedition. Hong Kong's really hilly. There's a lot of mountains, very mountainous piece of land. So yeah, it's really perfect for going on these hiking expeditions. In fact, Hong Kong is actually 80% of it is green. It's really kind of rural,
Now that is
untouched,
not something I
untapped
would have thought.
nature.
I wouldn't have
Yeah.
thought the
I mean,
slightest.
you look at Hong Kong, it's a very condensed,
Yes.
urbanized, densely populated environment and full of skyscrapers, a bustling city, but that only composes 20% of Hong Kong's land. The 80% is all either farms or it's trees and nature and stuff. And that's where we spent our time during the Duke of Edinburgh program, hiking
Fantastic.
expeditions.
So
And that's really quite that's a kind of inspiration from a lot of what British explorers did. They went on expeditions. They, even if they were in foreign lands, they were curious about, you know, different cultures and climates and environments. And yeah, a lot of the stereotypical explorers that you see in movies and stories and books, they're all kind of English or British. You know, Tarzan. That there's a kind of notoriety behind the British explorer, the one who travels to the pyramids of Egypt and documents the whole expedition and all that. So
well,
yeah,
it was
Britain
a
is really
nation
renowned
of,
for traveling around the world and exploring.
that is the thing. It was renowned as like a nation of explorers because as an island nation, you know, you're surrounded with water. Right. Well, what do you have lots of? Ships. So therefore you
Yeah,
go
yeah,
and
exactly.
explore.
Yeah. And the UK doesn't really have a lot of natural resources.
No,
It doesn't
no.
produce that much in terms of food and resources. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it was always this kind of pioneering spirit that came with Britain. And ultimately, a lot of places were mapped and documented. And that is one of the main reasons why we have the mapping as we have of the globe.
Yeah.
With everything.
Exactly.
And you also have to think about during times where a return was not guaranteed because of the sea, the oceans, and everything like that. You know, you'd send out however many ships, only so many would come back. It really was a country that was built on adventure, bravery, spirit, courage. But as with any kind of nation and superpower and all that, you have your difficulties. You have your people in places that shouldn't be in places, and
You have your wrong uns. Your
tell me
bad
a
eggs, your
country
wrong
that
uns.
hasn't. In all fairness, tell me a country that hasn't. I mean, but what it does have, it has what, in my opinion, is a set of rules, of ideas, of opinions, of a way of life, and it is obviously one that different places have tried to not necessarily copy, but try and initiate into their own setup. So, like when you was going to this British school, they were trying to emulate that essence of Britishness in a way.
Exactly. You know, or they tried their best to. You know, if you treated a woman incorrectly in school, you know, you'd get a bollocking, a real bollocking for it. You know, you wouldn't, you know, hitting children in our school system. It wasn't like the Victorian era. You know, you would never hit students, or the teachers would never punish children physically. But yeah, there was a set of standards that you had to adhere to. And I think that's really lacking in modern school environments, especially within the Black community. I find in London, in these central cities, certain Black diasporas and individuals within the Black community in England, I find they're especially kind of disconnected from the school system, and they're quite rebellious in a way. That's quite interesting as well.
And that's definitely something I think we're going to touch upon, because I think there's lots of elements within the West and what we're experiencing even here in the UK, which is causing it's like cause and effect, basically. This is happening, so therefore this is the result we get from it. But so finishing school, how did we get on with school? How did we do well with grades and everything?
I wasn't like especially academically focused. I didn't really like school. Well, school in terms of like sitting there in the classroom. I just
setting fire to things.
Setting fire to things, smashing windows, going to the loo without asking the teacher. I mean, well, every student does that, don't they? Yeah, I love gaming during my school year. I still game, but we used to play. My brother and I used to play a game called Adventure Quest. Yes. And that's where the name Guardian Moes actually comes from. It was it was a really internet Zoomer thing to call yourself by a pseudonym. That's where Guardian Moes comes from. It's a kind of a pseudonym. All Zoomers know about this, but yeah, I was into gaming. I was into stories and reading books and stuff. And in secondary school, I got into the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis, Lord of the Rings. Brilliant stories, brilliant authors. Philip Pullman's a really good one. Anthony Horowitz, as I said. But yeah, I didn't do especially well in school, but I wasn't terrible. I was kind of average, I should say, I suppose. But yeah, so after GCSEs, we took something called what's called IB, International Bachelorate. So it's a kind of international version of A levels in a way, and it's a lot higher in terms of standard. It was very demanding. They kind of the way that the system works, they kind of pressure you to rote memorize a lot of information, bunch it all up together, and just stuff it into your head. That was the kind of way you learn and you were taught chemistry, biology, physics. We had to learn all these subjects, maths, English, and it was all just drilled into our heads, all this knowledge, a kind of factory processed way of educating students. We were educated not to learn, but to take tests. That was the whole purpose of our secondary school GCSE. Well, maybe not GCSE, but the latter parts of the latter years of the GCSE curriculum. So when I took IB, we have to take maths, we have to take English, we have to take the sciences. Then we can pick 3 other subjects. I picked psychology. So one of humanities, so I picked psychology. One of arts, so I picked music. And there was another one. It's an additional science subject. I think it was biology I took. But yeah, I was really interested in music. I used to produce music myself, so classical music and all that. But I fell out of that. But yeah, we learned about the history of the evolution from Baroque music into classical, and then eventually into romantic music, and even music from other countries as well. Psychology I was very interested in. So when it came to university, I was one of the only students in my class who didn't actually take university, because my mum, she couldn't afford it.
Oh, okay.
My mum and dad, they couldn't afford me. They could afford my brother to go to uni. He studied in Chicago. He went to the University of Chicago.
Favorite child.
He studied, yeah. The elder ones are always the favorite ones. He studied. I think it was sociology and English literature, I believe, in Chicago. My brother really likes Chicago. He always says he wishes he could have stayed in America, but that never really resulted in any fruitful outcome. But yeah, I never took university. Instead, I went into what's called a culinary school.
Yeah.
Culinary arts for 2 years. I wanted to be a chef until I realized that's not really a line of work that I'm interested in. It's more of a cooking, culinary arts as a hobby. You know, I fell out of the career aspect of kitchen and restaurant work.
What
So
that
then,
sounds to me is it sounds to me you're very similar to me in the respect of I don't really know what I want to do. I'm sort of
yeah,
dipping my toes in
basically,
things.
yeah,
Very
it's
much
dipping
the
my
same.
toes into
Yeah.
multiple areas. I was always like that, to be honest.
Hmm.
I'm quite high in trait openness, if you know what openness represents. But yeah,
Mhm.
a lot of people with high openness tend to they're a jack of all trades but a master of none. They don't really focus in on or hone in onto one particular area or subject. But yeah, so after the culinary school, I started pondering. I worked at I think it was a beach club or a bar or something. I worked there for 2 years, I think. Gained a bit of job experience in hospitality and kind of front of house customer service within a restaurant, kind of hospitality background. And then my parents kind of urged me to actually move to the UK and just to broaden my horizons, go for better job opportunities.
Sorry, I was just like, can you just leave the country? Can you
Can
go
you,
to a
yeah, can
different
you just?
country, please?
I'm sick of you. We've raised you for what 20 years already.
And
Just
then
get
they send
out of
you
our
here,
lives.
of all places, not the Bahamas or anywhere like that. You come for
Exactly. Yeah. Why come to this miserable part of the world? But yeah, one thing I forgot to mention was I was born with a British passport. So not all Hong Kongers are born with a British passport. Um, what happened was my dad, before mom and dad got married, my father he applied for some kind of program where the British um, authorities I think they had this rollout program for a limited period for about I think 100,000, something around 100,000 Hong Kongers could apply for British citizenship for their children as well. Applied for their children, um, as long as you met certain criteria. I don't know what the criteria is, but my dad applied for it. He got a British passport, and it applies to his children as well.
oh,
But it
wow.
doesn't apply to his spouse. So my mother doesn't have one. So my brother has a British passport. I have a British passport from birth. So having that kind of background, I think having a British passport, I was always quite curious as to why that happened. So I always did kind of a bit of background research into my later adult years. I did research into how Hong Kong was birthed and what the British did um, in relationship to China and how Hong Kong was governed under British colonialism. And yeah, I did a lot of research into that. And so I don't see it as a right to have a British passport. I just see it as a privilege. You know, I'm privileged
Hmm.
with just having been born with one. So with my British passport, I can legally live and work here in the UK. No, no limits. I'm just treated the same as you and all the rest of the other native-born Brits. Whether that's right or wrong, that's up to the viewers. But yeah, so that's the reason why I moved to the UK. It
Yeah.
wasn't really out of convenience. It was just to really kind of I moved here just for really sensible reasons, for just to broaden my horizons, as I said.
And
To
where did you end up? Where did you first come
to London,
to
to
London?
London. Yeah. So when I grew up, all my life I could never really speak Cantonese, the local language of Hong Kong. I never really connected with uh, the Cantonese language or even Chinese culture on a whole. I never really connected with it because of the way I was brought up, because of my school environment, because of my school background and always speaking English all my life. So as a result of that, it's quite easy to assimilate someone like me into British culture or any Western society, as opposed to Muhammad or
Well,
Jamal or
yeah,
someone
and I guess the
who
thing is,
comes from fucking
even though you was in this,
New Delhi.
I know, even though you was in this British school, what were your initial thoughts when you first sort of came over to here and you were starting to see the society and that? What were your initial kind of thinking and feeling?
Yeah, so bit of background. So I got the um I got my job in Hong Kong. I did my interview in Hong Kong. It was a, a waiter role, a server role for Four Seasons Hotel in
Hmm.
Park Lane. Four Seasons are quite renowned, especially here in the UK, in Europe actually. But that was my first job in hospitality. So when I moved here, I had to do the usual things, you know, national insurance number and all the hassle of getting a bank account for the very first time. I almost ran into debt. My bank account got into, you know, well, not overdraft, but it was like literally I made a series of mistakes. Um, the first flat that I rented, I had to pay like what 3 months of rent in advance. Some landlords do that. It's perfectly normal actually, but I think they make they make you pick between options. You either have a guarantor or you pay months in advance. So I chose
Hmm.
months in advance because I don't really have a guarantor. There's nobody living in the UK that I was related to at the time. And even till now, I'm not related to anyone that lives here in the UK apart from my nuclear family. But yeah, to answer your question, my first impressions of London, not the UK, but London, was it was really quite kind of multicultural,
Hmm.
um, very multicultural environment, big bustling urban environment. It's it was familiar but unfamiliar at the same time because I was born and raised in a city. And when you move to a city, it's not all too different. I've traveled around the world um, during my life. I've traveled to Japan, to America. I've been to multiple places in the world. My parents could afford it. So I've had the luxury of being able to travel, I guess, as a spoilt child, my brother and I. But yeah, London was, when I came here, it was very multicultural. And I did notice that. I didn't view it negatively at the time, back in 2018. I think it was 2 years after the Brexit vote. I still was kind of getting first into my political journey, my spiritual journey, personal journey. But yeah, I didn't view London. I just viewed London as kind of an urban metropolis. I didn't view it anything else.
Yeah, and I think it's for as long as I can remember, it's been like that. Now, gradually, it's got, if you want to say worse and worse and worse, it's got more diverse and more diverse. Um, but one thing that I am now noticing with people who are visiting London from abroad, so let's say Americans particularly, are going
Hmm.
to London and then going, what is this? Because it's not what they see in the movies, it's not what they see in TV, it's not what they've been told
It's
about,
not what they envisioned. No,
it's not
no.
what they envision. They go around and go, where are all the English people?
Mm.
Because they see like I said, the films, the TV shows, the books, the stories, the history, the so on, and then they turn up and they basically see New York, but in England, basically. Um, and it's just always interesting just to get like a person's opinion of when they first come here, just to see what London is like. Because when you are English, you already, unless you're from London, you've got an idea of London, and it's always kind of like London, everywhere else is nice. Then you got London, right? But it's quite interesting to hear that initially you just took it as maybe just a variation of Hong Kong, basically.
Yeah, a different environment. I always knew that like cities around the world were kind of urban metropolises. They were no different from each other, except for a few kind of cultural, they are different cultural frameworks. But yeah, I did, I went pretty balls deep into the inner workings of this multiculti, diverse, modernist London. I the first place I moved to was Clapham. That's in South London. Well, now it's notoriously known for its dodgy neighborhoods.
Right to the eye of
I
the
mean,
beast there.
I mean, we had that TikTok incident a few weeks back, didn't we?
Yes.
In Clapham, but yeah, I traveled. I spent my off days traveling to different parts of London, looking into multiple areas. I did subconsciously notice that different parts of London or different areas within London, they hold various ethnic enclaves. So Brixton was known for its kind of Afro-Caribbean
Yes.
peoples, and then there was a Jewish area, particularly in Golders Green or East London. East London was also known for its African community, Caribbean community, and then in North London, it was a mix of everything, really. There were the white liberal communities as well, the kind of Karen communities. Yeah, but West London is more white than the other parts of London. But yeah, it's a real mix. London is kind of a mixed bag. It's not really. I wouldn't call it a melting pot. It's more of a segregated a cluster of ethnic enclaves. I did subconsciously notice that, and I didn't really connect to it very well. I didn't like London. In fact, I still don't like it. That's why I moved out.
The thing is, I think what you probably then noticed, if you can, like you said about the school you went to, you had a variety of different ethnicities and appearances and all that, but you all gelled together, and you all
we interacted really well. Like there was no real overt racism. Like even like puppy love, or students, kids kissing despite their racial, ethnic background. It didn't really matter. We all just got on together.
And yet you came to London, and yet there's just segregation and
and I came to London. I was just really shocked. Like nobody's really interacting with each other harmoniously. I saw a lot of conflicts and fights break out on the streets for no apparent reason. It was a really shithole. Already when I came, well, now it's an even bigger shithole than it was when I came. But yeah, it's really gone downhill ever since 2020. But I did notice the lack of standards. I think back in Hong Kong, things were organized. When you went through what we call the equivalent of the tube is the MTR, the motor transit railway system, or whatever. It's public transport for Hong Kong. Everything's clean. There's no pollution or littering. If you litter, you could be fined up to 1,000 Hong Kong dollars. Hong Kong has its own currency, by the way. But yeah, everything was nice and efficient and organized and clean, and there was a kind of a social harmony. Even though Hong Kong people are notoriously rude and disrespectful, they're known for being lacking in manners. But there was a kind of social harmony. People kind of recognized that either from along the lines of peer pressure or society as a whole, we recognized that there was a level of behavioral standards that you adhered to. And that's something that's completely lacking in these multicultural cities or metropolises.
Well, I am thinking about
London.
making an exceedingly large amount of money off of a new form of X-rated material, which I'm going to be calling civilized society porn. Okay, because if I'm ever having a really shite day where people have got on my nerves and all that, I'll fling on some videos of somebody walking around Japan or anything like that, and I can sit there and go, oh yeah, look at that, clean streets. Oh, look at that, everyone's quiet. Oh, it's amazing. You just get to see what it could be like, if you see what I mean, and what it should be like, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that was like I was just subconsciously absorbing everything. Yeah, I wasn't really tapping into. I never knew who Tommy Robinson was, or who Rupert Lowe or Ben Habib was. I was just really just focused on my 9 to 5, my hospitality job, and in my off days, either traveling around London, or if the weather would turn sour, I would just stay in my room, and I would kind of I got into self-improvement at the time. I was tapping into kind of stories and stuff to do with Western liberal thinking, philosophy, and I got into my kind of personal development, self-develop. I hate the word self-development. I prefer self-discovery. But at the time, it was coined as self-development until it turned into a very nasty version of a kind of Andrew Tate, HS Tiki Toki, the kind of manosphere red pilly bullshit, very materialistic. But yeah, at the time, self-development was my kind of I vibe with it. The first person I got into was Jordan Peterson.
Absolutely amazing guy.
Yeah, he really transformed everything, that the way that I saw the world, my own life, and he instills in young people a kind of personal responsibility. That was what he was always on about.
Tidy your room, wasn't it?
Tidy your own room, clean your own part of the world or your own little cubicle, clean your own room, tidy yourself up, make yourself a model of the society you want to see. Become a model citizen or a model blueprint individual of a wider community that you envision for yourself, for your family, for your community. So it starts from the individual, and then it extrapolates out to the community, and that's what he was always on about. I read his 10 rules for life and this and that. But the Jordan Peterson now, he's completely different from when he was when I got into him. Yeah, he's completely changed. I think he's been compromised some way.
He's always breaking down for a start, from what I've noticed.
Yeah, he started crying, on live, and it went viral and all that. And he went into some kind of psychological mental state, so I don't really understand it fully. But I do know how it's all sequenced. But yeah, back in the days of the Jordan Peterson era, he was all about personal responsibility. That was.
Well, I think a lot of people needed that, and they still need that. To be honest, they need that responsibility, and I think because to touch upon this, because you mentioned it as well, 2020, when the world ended, basically, people either woke up, and I say that literally, wake up to the world and how it is, or people became more entrenched in what they were already in. And it sounds to me that maybe 2020 was a time of maybe enlightenment for yourself, where maybe you started to notice things, or you tell me.
Well, 2018 was the year that was kind of an enlightenment. I already began sort of questioning the way in which the world operated back in 2016. I couldn't vote for Brexit back in Hong Kong because you can't vote outside of the UK, even though I was a British citizen. But I would have voted for Brexit. But at the time, I couldn't really articulate it properly. I knew that this kind of hegemon, this globalist European Union, was swallowing up individual nation states, and there was something fundamentally wrong with the way that the European Union is organized. And I was always defending Brexit to the hilt, but I couldn't really articulate it at that time. But now I can, with all the knowledge and experience that I've gathered, and all the research that I've done. But yeah, 2018 was the kind of wake up moment when I noticed that there was something wrong with society. I guess Western society as a whole, the English speaking world. There was no real connection between people, and families were breaking down. And I was always quite introverted my whole life. I never had the feeling of loneliness that a lot of people attribute to feeling alone or spending time alone. When I was cooped up in my own studio flat, or I was traveling around London by myself, I even traveled to other European countries as well. I went to Spain, Portugal, Poland, Czech Republic. I just traveled all by myself. I didn't really find it an issue. So I've never felt alone or lonely in that aspect. I just got into self-development, focus on myself, and that's when I started doing research into the wider topics like philosophy, the more esoteric topics, I guess you could say, religion, spirituality, and what gave rise to Western civilization, and now we witness the downfall.
And what we have now is a country that is, excuse me, it's ever more split down the middle. Ultimately, between, I mean, those who are left are going further left, and those that are right are turning further right. So, if anything, instead of meeting in the middle in any way, it's actually going further polar opposite. And I guess the thing is that when you've got a society that's like that, can it be sewn back together? Is there any, or does something monumental have to happen for that to be allowed to happen?
I think the answer to that question is still quite unknown. There's a lot of mystery lurking around that because we're in a completely new era. You know, AI is on the rise. Technology has advanced like never before. Absolute poverty has been completely eliminated in Western society. You know, there's a difference between poverty and absolute poverty.
Yes.
You know, there is poverty in countries like the UK and France, but there's no absolute poverty. Absolute poverty, as in the four things that human beings all rely on: food, shelter, fire being resources, and water, clean water. None of us are incapable of gathering those four, or none of us are kind of lacking in those four resources. Nobody lives in absolute poverty in Western society as a result of the development of capitalism. I'm not defending capitalism, by the way. I'm just describing the sequence of events. But yeah, the answer to your question is really, there's quite a lot of a mystery to it. You know, how do we sew the pieces together and form a homogeneous, harmonious society, and whether Western civilization can be rebirthed? You know, we can already diagnose the problems, and we know the cause. We sort of know the causes of it, but as to the cure for this downfall, it's still quite, even I don't really know what the true answer is. But I guess what I would say, what my worldview is to return back to a Christian civilization. I'm really kind of a Christendom traditionalist. You know, I throughout my personal journey, I got into Christianity. I picked up my Bible, started reading it, and with my background of you know, submerging myself into compelling stories, I was really quite captivated by the Christian story of Christ, and the history of Christian civilization. I tapped into that kind of era of the Roman Catholic Church that spread its wings, and it's separated out from the Eastern Orthodox, and it eventually turns into Protestant Reformation. Then we have the beginnings of scientific enlightenment. But on the whole, I think even though I don't have the true answer to the problems that we're now facing with, I can definitely tell you what the diagnosis or the problems that have led to the downfall of Western civilization are.
And speaking of that, what would you say are the main issues that this, if we, I mean, we can,
not the main issues. I think what's important is to outline the causes, right? So there's a real combination of multiple, it's a really multifaceted phenomenon. What's caused the downfall of Western civilization is a culmination of different things, of historical events and time periods. And it depends on which kind of rabbit hole you want to go into, whether it be spiritual, whether it be esoteric, philosophical, or political, or economic, or cultural. There's lots of different factors that go into play. But I guess the three main things I could outline would be what's called decadence. It's a phenomenon called decadence. I'm not sure if you heard of it. The decline of Christianity, spiritual, cultural, historical, and the rise of liberalism. Okay. So all of them, they kind of work simultaneously. They work in tandem with each other. And in other ways, they're kind of tangential. But the best way I can explain decadence is all societies, all civilizations have gone through a period of decadence. And this is a period in Western civilization that we're going through. That we possibly we've actually already surpassed. We've passed decadence actually. Decadence is really a phenomenon in which societies or civilizations, they self-indulge in their own wealth and affluence,
Yeah.
in the way that it's been accumulated over a period of time, and it detracts from its historical roots and traditions. It forgets its past. It deviates away from its cultural tradition, and really its kind of cultural moral framework or bedrock. So this isn't just limited to Western civilization. It can happen to any civilization, and it's most notoriously known in the decline of the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire really went into a period of decadence as a result of, gathering on lots of resources. So the rise of the Roman Empire, they developed a lot of new technologies. They were at the time highly technologically advanced. They respected the Greek philosophers. So the Romans took a lot of inspiration from Greek philosophy. Sometimes they delved into a lot of pagan philosophies as well, until they reached a point of decadence, wherein a lot of the Roman elites or the rulers or the nobles at the time, they fell into hedonism, nihilism. They started self-indulging, self-flagellating. They fell into a period of sometimes narcissism, self-flattery. A lot of Roman rulers, they started erecting statues of themselves.
Well, that's the thing I was going to say. What, instead of having this belief in a higher power, they're saying, "I am the higher power. I am your
Yeah,
god."
exactly. Yeah, they lost their connection to a higher spirit, or all human beings should kind of direct their attention towards a higher power. But the Roman Empire, a lot of the Roman rulers, they they depended on man, on human beings to be that fulfilled. They essentially deify themselves. They turn themselves into their own gods, and they deviated away from cultural historical tradition. So they erected statues of themselves. They would compete on what kind of the most exotic animals they could hunt and gather and eat: peacocks, pheasants, and different exotic animals. They would erect statues and monuments of snakes, of exotic animals, and other very strange, weird, like a weird combination of animals as well. So yeah, that was decadence in the Roman era. In other examples, we see it in Indian civilization, in China as well, in ancient China. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Song dynasty in China.
No, I'm not actually.
So back in the days, China, during the Song dynasty, they fell into a kind of a period of weakness. So the rulers didn't really manage to govern China very well, and so China kept being invaded by, I think it was the descendant of Genghis Khan. I think it was the grandson of Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, the Mongol barbarians, the invaders. They invaded China, and what happened was, because China fell into such a prolonged period of decadence, instead of actually funding resources and time and money and manpower into defending the frontier of China and defending themselves against the Mongol invaders, they started writing poems, Confucian poems, about how they wanted to liberate China from the Mongol invaders. So they kind of fell into poetry and fictitious. Hello?
Yeah, hello, I'm here. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think I've frozen.
You have frozen.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right, I'll continue speaking. But
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah, they developed sort of Confucian stories and poems that were completely sort of detached from reality. So that's essentially what decadence is you detach from reality in the pursuit of something that's very hedonistic and self-indulgent. Same with India as well. When uh, Indian tribes and the I think the rulers of 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 the Hindu civilization, they fell under decadence. They were being invaded by the Mughals. I believe that it's called the Mughal Empire, the Muslim invaders. And so instead of actually, again, funding manpower and resources into repelling the Mughal Empire and the Muslim invaders, they started erecting Hindu temples to please the gods. So they were completely detached from reality. Yeah.
So what
So
do they say? They
that's
say
the
good times create weak men, as they
yeah,
say.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Too much of this wealth and affluence, too much of these good times, they produce weak mentalities and weak men. That's the result of decadence. So I'm still frozen, but
no, you're absolutely fine. I can still hear you because what I think back to is the Blitz, and all people ever talk about was Britain's spirit during that time. Okay, because it was hard times. We were under attack by the Germans. People were on rations, and people still got on with it. And if anything, it made people tighter. It made communities tighter. It made people care for one another. And so that kind of feeds into that idea of, well, if you've got, difficult times, it creates better people, in all fairness, and great and stronger communities.
yeah, exactly. And I think the fall of Western man is really to do with the rise of the Industrial Revolution as well. The increase of technology and how everything's so convenient, and the rise of smartphones and all of that. We don't feel the need to do challenging things. Everything's at at our fingertips. You know, everything's so easy and convenient, and you can do things so simply. And so Western man has really kind of in a kind of spiritual, cultural sense, has lost its need to retain its cultural tradition, its Christian tradition.
Because there is something to hard work, isn't there? There is something. When people think about, even if they had a day where they worked manually and they worked very hard, as tough as it might be, there's always a sense of achievement at the end of it. And you have to remember, this is what these people had every single day, because they had to. They had to work the lands. They had to do it to get food. And with that comes this, like I said, this sense of achievement, this pride, this sort of realization that, you're only as strong as how hard you're working. Okay. And I think that's an element that's got lost in this nation.
Yeah. In a way, I think we're not really compelled to do hard work. We're more compelled just to survive. And it's actually kind of accentuated our more primal, primitive instincts, I suppose.
Let AI do it. That's what they say, isn't it?
Yeah. With the rise of AI, it's quite scary, actually. It's kind of dystopian in a way that they can figure things out easily for us. You don't have to write pieces of literature or write an essay or dissertation. You just rely on technology and AI. It's all about ease and convenience.
One thing I do want
to just to touch on something very quickly. Sure. As a result of decadence, societies naturally become more laissez-faire, lazy, self-indulgent, boisterous sometimes, and arrogant. A lot of French culture is quite arrogant and decadent. I find, but absolutely. It can apply to any culture. No culture is exempt. But historically, mostly it was India and China that fell into very prolonged periods of decadence. Very, very prolonged periods of decadence.
it takes an awful lot for people to summon up the energy and the effort to participate in something. And there is something, obviously, we're touching upon today, which is this Unite the Kingdom March, which, although by the time this recording's gone out, it would have already been and gone. And fingers crossed, everybody's okay. You said to me you're attending it. Why do you think so many people are looking to attend this and to participate in this? What is it about this that has got people out of that decadent laissez-faire style kind of society and are actually putting their feet on the ground and going to this?
I think it's a real consequence of what a kind of pseudo tyrannical state has resulted in. You know, the people aren't stupid. When you piss farmers off, when you when people's energy bills are affected, when people's food is affected, and even, you know, certain family laws, taxes are applied, inheritance tax, people's livelihoods are impacted, you're naturally going to see a very kind of fiery reaction from the people. And so this is has what resulted in Tommy Robinson's gatherings. I find Tommy Robinson, you know, as an individual, he's quite, you know, courageous. There's a lot of qualities that he's very commendable for. I wished he'd, you know, he wouldn't be so flashy about the way he, you know, the restaurants he dines in.
Yeah.
You know, people will speculate about his Zionist funding and whether he's funded by the Jews. So he needs to be more careful about that. And some people call him a grifter. And yeah, there are, you know, some questions that arise out of that. But on the whole, I think what Tommy Robinson has done to shine a light on the grooming gangs and child sexual exploitation, Pakistani Muslims per capita overwhelmingly being involved in it. That's really, yeah, it's really he shone a light on all of this. And I think there's also a reason as to why a lot of these gatherings, not just Tommy's gatherings, but a lot of these street protests take place, is because of the gaslighting, the non-stop, endless gaslighting from politicians, from the media, and from these intellectual experts, what they call, you know, experts in their fields. When they're so completely detached from reality, they're really a result of decadence.
The thing is that you will get a very large number of people who will cover this Unite the Kingdom March, and they'll say, this is just an example of the fact that this nation is still a racist nation. Are we a racist nation?
Is the UK right now a racist nation?
Yes.
Absolutely not. I mean, like, the British, I've always known British people to be the least racist people in the entire world compared to other cultures, I think. There's a certain, I think, humility to British culture. You know, the British don't really like to speak on the behalf of others. They're a bit more tolerant and open to new ideas, I suppose, and they're more tolerant of people assimilating. I think English being so easily accessible and the proliferation of the internet, and, you know, English should be the easiest language to learn on the whole, internationally. You know, it should be the easiest, you know, English speaking countries should be the easiest to assimilate into. So, you know, all this racism, you know, throwing of buzzwords of far right, fascist, bigot, Nazi, it's just a way to kind of slander people and smear them in it with a bad name, to put them in a bad light. It's not really, there's no real substance to it, you know. And
No,
it just gets boring. It's just a way to smear people, and people know that, and people are aware of that.
Fairness, I think that is where, whether you would be inclined to vote for his party or not, but where I think Rupert Lowe has got it very good is this line of "I don't care." I think he's nabbed onto that because it's now got to the point where people are like, "Do you know what? I've been called this, I've been called that. It's got to the point of, do you know what? I don't care, because what difference does it make? Because you have these people, look at these celebrities or whoever who've been called out for maybe something they tweeted 10 years ago or something like that, and then they naturally get rolled out to apologize and everything, but the apology is never good enough. They're always made to suffer more. So has it perhaps part of the reason this is doing so well, this Unite the Kingdom thing, is that people have got to the part now where it's like, I don't care?
Yeah, there's a sense of pride in some of these people, in the protesters. They're proud of being English or British, proud of their heritage, and part of that I think is quite virtuous and commendable. I guess that I don't care sentiment from Rupert Lowe and a lot of supporters, not just Restore Britain, but a lot of the supporters on this whole nationalist movement are basically, this is the result of people being fed up, of being gaslit, of being told lies. So literally, this is the reaction of normal, everyday human beings. Like, even in a workplace, if you're being bullied or mistreated over numerous occasions over a prolonged period, there will come a point when you snap and you say to your boss, like, no, I don't care what you say, do not treat me this way, or else I will either leave the country and leave you to sort out your mess, or we sort things out. But this I don't care sentiment is really quite natural, I think. I wouldn't say it's needed or necessary, but I think it's very natural, and it follows a sequence of events.
One thing I am a bit concerned about, mate, and hopefully by the time this video comes out, it would be an unnecessary worry from me, is this idea that obviously we've got the Unite the Kingdom rally on Saturday, but then we've also got a pro-Palestine march on the same day. And by the way, we've also got the FA Cup final. I'll tell you what, who planned this? I have no idea. Who decided to put these all on the same date in London? Yeah. But it's the worry in me and the worry for people like you of what's going to happen. Because do I entrust the Met to be able to not perhaps agitate things or do things to maybe cause a few issues and all that? I guess what I'm saying is I'm a bit worried about what might happen, because it's getting more and more tinderbox all the time. Is this something that you're concerned? I mean, I know you're going, but are you concerned about it at all?
So before I answer that, I have to ask you, like, have you attended any other Tommy Rollins, like, previous rallies?
No, I wanted to go to both of these, but for reasons outside of my control, I've not been able to. But it's just that the only reason I ask is that I would hate to think for something to happen. That's all.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been to all of the rallies, all of Tommy's rallies. Yeah, ever since the 1st of June last year. I think it was 2024. But the only conflicts I could see were mini scuffles and all that. There's no like one side versus the other mega fighting going on. I think the last rally that I went to there was a lot of disorganization. My brother and I, we couldn't make it across the bridge. So we ended up being corralled by the police. We tried to find an alternative route, and then we ended up right in the beating heart of the pro stand up for racism.
Yes, I was aware
rapism march, and that ended up in some kind of fight and conflict. But it wasn't like all fists out or anything. Someone did throw a Molotov cocktail. And it was literally 20 yards away from me. But that's what happens in these street protests. Sometimes they do break out. You see it on camera, it looks quite graphic, but when you're in the presence of them, it can feel quite scary and intimidating.
Well, that's why I was saying, because there were others who were very similar to you. They were unable to cross the bridge, and they kind of got bottlenecked into this area near where the counter protest was, and the general consensus I got was that it felt deliberate. Whether it was or not is a different matter, but they said it felt deliberate on behalf of the Met that they weren't allowed to cross. Because why would you put these people together unless you wanted to cause some agitation?
Yeah, some people say that, the bridge, couldn't really take on the weight of that number of
Mm,
people crossing. Yeah, potentially, but still, I don't really trust the police in the way that they were bottlenecking us and dragging us all the way to the pro stand up for rapism,
mm,
plasticine marches,
mhm.
and yeah, I don't trust the police at all. Some of the people involved in there were really the attitudes were bad, and quite rude. And I believe that there are infiltrators who pretend to be on our side as
Yes.
well. I have,
Yeah.
without a shadow of a doubt, there are infiltrators and people that are kind of you know, have nefarious purposes, I suppose,
Mm.
um, who are used to hijack these kinds of events. Yeah.
The reason that I mention it as well is because obviously you're growing in popularity on YouTube. You are, whether you are rightly or wrongly, you're deemed a voice of the right by those who are on the left. But then, in all fairness, if you're not the most raving loony green in the world, you're considered right wing, anyways. But are you ever worried about the fact that obviously, if you continue becoming more popular and you becoming being listened to, that essentially you are going to be creating a target on your own back? Is that ever something that's ever crossed your mind?
Yeah, so I have to correct you on a detail about the right and left thing, but
Mm,
I'll talk about that later. But as in regards to like threats, the way I started this channel, the reason why I put up a pseudonym instead of my real name was to back back when I was making this YouTube channel, I saw Maya Tusi, the citizen journalist. He got
mhm,
death threats, and
mhm.
people were sending him photos of his own property, and so I got a bit intimidated by that. So I used a pseudonym, and even Jared is not my real name. It's
Yeah.
more to redirect people and to confuse people. So yeah,
Mhm,
I take these safety precautions and measures. But yeah, I sometimes I do kind of have that nudging feeling of, am I a target of something? Even when I drive home from work, if there's a car that follows me for a prolonged period, it's not out of paranoia, it's just out of personal safety that I go through a, fourth exit UE around the roundabout, and I avoid that driver, and I'll
mm.
drive home, you know, knowing that I wasn't being followed. But yeah, it can happen. But
Because there
yeah,
was just the guy who just I need I'm so terrible with names. I do apologize. Where he
oh,
just went to,
Wesley Winter, yeah,
yeah, where he's just been to Paris and got attacked
yeah,
by Antifa there,
he got completely fucking
mashed
beat
up.
up, tossed around like a punching bag. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
shocking, really shocking. Yeah,
Yeah, but it just
shocking.
goes to show the levels that people are willing to go to, and that is and I don't want that to ever be a case of people say, right, well, I'm never going to be able to do anything again just because that might happen. But I guess it's like, are people really aware of that? Actually, this could potentially happen.
Mm. Well, when you're in the thick of it, you have to prepare for it.
Mm,
But yeah, just stick to stick to each other like a group of sardines. That's what I'd say.
mm.
Power in numbers. This last time we had, I'd say, a minimum of 1 million people, and I didn't feel
No, there was
unsafe.
only 100,000, wasn't there?
Mm, yeah, I suppose you can definitely trust the government on that. 100%. I would trust Laura Kuenssberg any day.
Oh yes, of course, yeah, absolutely. Because when I was
Nag-
looking at that image and I saw the endless streams of people just going on forever, I thought, yeah, that's about 100,000. Yeah, they're just mad, absolutely mad.
Brilliant.
Um,
Very accurate statistics, isn't it?
absolutely. One thing that might also add a little bit of spice, maybe, to the events. King Charles's speech, which he, for some reason, decided to bestow upon the country, just to niggle a little bit more. What was your take of it?
I think the king is just in a position of compromising and bending the knee to the WEF, the
Oh
globalist
yes. Oh yeah.
infrastructure. You know, he has no authority whatsoever. He probably knows it. He's probably conscious of it,
Yeah.
and he's an absolute coward. That's it. Full
Mm,
stop. Really, it's just horrible to see such an ancient tradition that is passed on. You know, the royal family, and that they represent, you know, an authority. They own this country and its subjects and its servants, and we're servants of the crown. Police officers are servants of the crown, and none of this is reflected in modern day Britain.
mm,
And you know, yeah, it's a real shame because you know this separation of powers in Britain, it goes long back. You know, separation of church and state. That you know, when people in troubling times, people can depend on, say, if the government shafts them, then they can depend on the Church of England or the royal family or different authorities. Or when the church goes corrupt, they can depend on the government and vice versa.
mm,
But now everyone is in cahoots with each other. You know, this is this whole establishment blob, and it seeps into every facet of society. That's the most disturbing part.
mm.
Um, I think we've run out of time in this video to actually go in. I really wanted to explain to you like all the research that I've done to go into what's actually caused it, but we'd have to do it in a future episode because
Yeah, absolutely.
all of
I'm
this
more
stuff,
than happy to have
it's
you on.
really, if you really want to go into that rabbit hole, it's really nefarious. The kind of the um the development of the Fabian Society, how communism managed to spread, the Soviet
Mm.
Union, the atrocities of the Chinese Communist Party, Cambodia, Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, all of this stuff, you know, it's all related. It's all related.
Absolutely. And the question, the pinpoint question that I want to ask you, because I'd love to get your opinion on this. King Charles, do you think he has actually converted to Islam?
Yes and no. It's a real difficult question. I think he's piggybacking off of Islam just to curry favor to the present, you know, winning side, the more muscular side, when he's really just a puppet of the WEF globalist project. So yes
Mm,
and no, I suppose. He's trying to play both sides of the conflict, but it's not really working out for him.
absolutely.
If you want to ask me, like personally, if King Charles is personally converted to Islam, um, I think possibly, yeah.
It seems like it. It seems
Maybe
like
out of, I think maybe out of naivety more
mm.
than anything nefarious. It's out of naivety. It's out of suicidal kind of empathy.
And there is something to the phrase of posh and stupid as well. I think there's a sort of this looks like a very nice, interesting thing to get into without actually really understanding it as well, if you see what I
Well,
mean.
that's suicidal empathy in a nutshell.
Yes.
The kind of
Yeah.
Rory Stewart Piers moron type,
Yes.
kind of posh, white liberal, kind of upper class, snobbish, that kind of sentiment.
Mm.
But
Let,
yeah, it
let me
plays a
tell you
role.
about something that I think was quite interesting for me to watch. Was this? I don't know if you saw it for yourself. This BBC video that they put out about dogs. Have we got too much of a love for dogs in this country? Did you see this?
Yes, I think I saw snippets of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because immediately the nation went, why? Why have we suddenly focused on this? Because we know there's a religion that has an issue with dogs. But there is one thing that you can say as an Englishman that the English love are their animals and their children. Okay. We're a little bit about everything else, but if anything happens to animals, anything happens to children, we tend to get very fired up. Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting that with the same faith, it's touched upon both of those because Southport, what you saw there, that outpouring wasn't the outpouring of far right bigots and so on. That was people who were furious, absolutely furious about what had been allowed to happen.
Yeah.
But also the Pakistani rape gangs. as well, and not just that, the perceived cover up of said things as well. It seems interesting then that you've got something here which is touching upon both of these. So whether it's animals and children and so on. And I think it's interesting then to see that actually this is what's getting people riled up as well. But Southport in particular, I think that was the first time in God knows how long I have seen people furious.
So what was the question again? Sorry.
Well, I'm just sort of making that as a point because I guess.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry.
I guess with I mean, what was your kind of? I mean, I think he almost literally put his foot in his own mouth, Keir Starmer, with his response to it. What was your sort of take of the post Southport sort of period, shall we say?
Yeah, I think it was. I observed my observation was kind of a deep-seated resentment in the people, the English people. Yeah, and resentment comes out of long periods of obfuscation of information. That's what the government has been engaged in: obfuscating information purposely, willingly, and intentionally. The Pakistani grooming gangs, they've been exposed. Maggie Oliver has talked about it. Tommy Robbins talked about it. Lots of people have, because of the internet, we all have access to the information, and the algorithm feeds into that. We hear it from YouTube and X, and lots of people do their research into it. They talk to their friends of friends. They talk to each other about it. There's a whole consensus, nationwide consensus, I think, especially amongst the working class, that not only that current modern Britain as a society is not functioning in terms of its infrastructure and institutions, but that the native people, there's an intentional breakdown of demographics. They're trying to replace the native people with Mohammedans. People notice these things. I certainly believe that there's a very nasty form of demographic replacement that's taking place. It's out of it's to do with critical theory, critical race theory. The kind of pluralism of race and ethnicity, and that all human beings, I guess, are equal, except for straight white males. I suppose straight white males are the
worst
top of
everybody else. Yeah,
the worst of the worst, the pinnacle of the entire structure, the hierarchical structure of oppression, oppressor versus oppressed. This is all Marxist theory. This is all Marxist and communist, socialist in nature. All of this is tied together. But that Southport incident was really kind of an outburst from the native community. It's a kind of deep-seated resentment that's been bubbling on the surface, and just people are fed up, completely fed up with the lies. It's one thing to acknowledge the incident that took place, that it was in fact to do with a certain religion, a particular ideology, and that there was ricin being produced inside of that flat, and there was a terrorist manual that was present, and that he was studying it.
Nothing to do with terrorism, though.
No, obviously not. And nowadays, all of the cases that we see, they straight away they rule out terrorism just to reassure the general public that everything's fine and dandy. There's nothing going on.
It's counterproductive though, because the second that they do that, I think everyone immediately goes, "Well, obviously it is then."
It's a completely counterintuitive exercise. They completely failed to read the room, and even I'm surprised that the police have taken this sort of course of action. So, yeah, this is really quite troubling.
Have the police been captured? Is there such thing as two-tier justice in the?
Oh yeah, they're 100% captured. They're in cahoots with the establishment, whether or not it's a kind of a reciprocal relationship or it's being forced down the throats of Mark Rowley or the police chiefs and all that, and or they're being blackmailed or something. There's a lot of mystery about that, but there's definitely establishment involvement going on in the police. There's no way there is not just the police. Look at the judicial system as well. It's not even a judiciary; it's a lawfare system. You
Mm,
know, if you put yourself into the shoes of a modern British judge, and they judge a case of whether or not an Afghani family should be deported, do you know what? What would be a real good justification of why they should stay in the country? Why shouldn't they be deported? Because the father's son doesn't like chicken nuggets belonging to his source country. How brilliant is that? Do you know what?
mm.
That's a great. That's something I never thought about. Chicken nuggets. Boy, do they taste good in Britain. They're absolute shite, by the way.
And also, wasn't it the fellow who was done for paedophilia but refused to be deported because he'd miss out on time with his children? It's like, yeah.
Yeah, let's look at the let's flip open the pages of the ECHR. Oh yeah, Article 8. It says that an individual has a right to family life.
Absolutely. I think people are just frustrated. I think people what Southport does to me and the United Kingdom marchers, it gives me hope. It gives me hope that, do you know what? If this country, this sleeping giant, is roused enough, it can pop if it wants to. The problem is that we're now getting commentary online about, well, the savior that we're supposedly going to need, which is on the right, that is now being split. Do you think the right is being split?
Um okay. So I have a number of thoughts about this, but on the whole, my own thought about it is that this whole this whole project that we're involved in, it's all a kind of a jigsaw puzzle, and all the pieces are aligning together, but they're just fragmented at
Hmm.
the current, at this current moment. So, advance UK and restore Britain and reform being all divided and the vote being split. I think there will come a time where things absolutely, the people are dragged down to the bottom of the pit, and this country just goes into either economic recession, or there's something really dramatic happens. Some people call it mass civil unrest or civil war. I think various forces that have, or political entities that have kind of sparse agreements on the general fundamental ideas and the fundamental notions of protecting Britain will fall in line and come together in some way, shape, or form. I think there will be a kind of a harmonious gathering of all the political entities. I don't include reform, by the way. I think reform, they've been sold off to the establishment. I think Nigel Farage has been compromised, and he's basically absorbed reform into the Uni Party. It's just
Yeah.
that the individual elements within reform are good people, and that
Hmm.
they're passionate about protecting the interests of the country. But
And it's such
yeah,
a
it's just been.
shame because so many people, including myself, were celebrated when, oh, thank God, there's another alternative. There's reform.
Yeah,
Um,
we've
and
been hoodwinked. We've all
yes,
been. I was a Nigel Farage kind of not fan, but he was. I think
yeah.
he was a political hero for me.
Mm.
But yeah, and little did I know.
But the
But
madness
I
of,
think
I mean, I don't know if what optics they have gone for with the taking on people from the Conservative Party, active members of the Conservative Party who were there during all the issues that we're now talking about, and architects of the issues that we're talking about. I
yeah,
don't understand the optics for reform, to be honest with
it's
this.
ridiculous. It's absolute Nadeem Zahawi. I just think was the cherry on top of the cake, the really rotten cherry on top of the cake,
Mm,
and even like recruiting Muslims as well, or like just brown people in a white majority town being a elected councillor. Like,
mm.
what? Where is? Have you actually done your research? Do you honestly think that in a 96% county or town, 96% white county or town, white English, that that particular brown person was the perfect candidate for the cow. I just don't believe it. You know, I just think they're kowtowing to the establishment. I just honestly think they're being DEI compromised. But
Yeah.
But as I said, this jigsaw puzzle is going to be put together in place. I think Humpty Dumpty, all the pieces will be brought back together again. But a lot of people, I think, are being misguided out of desperation. Not because they're bad people, not because they're stupid. It's just they're so desperate for change in this country that they're looking for that one savior, that one political entity to save them, whether that be Reform UK, Restore Britain, or UKIP even, or Advance. But I'd say, for me personally, I don't look at things like that. I don't look at one savior or one person being that man to restore or revitalize the greatness of Britain. It's really all of these jigsaw pieces coming together. So Rupert Lowe, I think he has good intentions. I think what he's doing is really brilliant. Ben Habib as well, and Nick Tenconi. It's just that they're part of a wider project. They're part of a wider picture. They're not the complete picture. Don't depend solely on Nigel Farage, Rupert Lowe, Ben Habib, Nick Tenconi on solving the issues, because at the end of the day, why should we be depending on politicians to fix our issues? Why can't we depend on ourselves? You know, it's not self-discovery. Sorry.
I guess the only thing is that
introspection. You know, make yourself a model citizen of what you want the country to become. Don't just wait for the politicians to solve it for you. Start right now. You know, go out and
I guess, to be honest with you, I think the thing
do some good in the community.
I think the thing I do like about what Restore are doing, and I know I keep mentioning them, but I do what I'm seeing is promising, but I have been hoodwinked before, so I am aware of that. What I am liking, though, is their desire to have candidates in areas that are A, from that area, and B, have some kind of, whether it's business acumen or anything like that. These are not just career politicians who let's be honest, they don't know anything about anything. That's becoming apparent. I think it is this understanding of, look, in your community, if you need things sorted out, you need to do it within your community, and you need a representative from your community to lead that. And I think that is what's quite good. So not everything's coming from Westminster, not everything's coming from wherever. You are sorting things out in your own community. And I think that is the way that we can get these places back to where they need to be.
Yeah, local representation, that's the key.
Yes.
But as I said again, like this is part of a wider picture. So it's not just political, it's cultural, it's spiritual. And I think, well, for context, I was part of Advance UK. I still am until my membership expires. I think it's in June or July. I won't be renewing my membership for Advance. I won't be joining Restore. I support everybody, really. I support everyone who's part of the project. But what I will ask you is to turn it back on, not in any with bad intents or purposes, but to turn a question on you. What do you believe in? Why do you support Restore? What is Restore Britain exactly? Like, can you actually describe Rupert Lowe's worldview? Do you know what he represents?
I think with Restore, and obviously this is my interpretation of it, so bear in mind this might be different to other people's, but it's an idea of meritocracy, which I think has been sorely missing, because we have had successive governments of people who have actually not been very good in their jobs. They've either been career politician failists, they've either have no experience of business and yet are now in charge of economy. What Restore is saying to me is, okay, look, we want people to be able to live their lives undisturbed in a true Christian, even if you're not Christian, but a Christian themed, a Christian society, and one where you're not ashamed to be English, which is what they're trying to make us be within our own nation. it is to be able to make money. I know that forms into like the capitalist side of things, but ultimately capitalism has allowed us to better ourselves in terms of our incomes and what we can afford and what we can do. But what I also think is it is that idea of common sense, and as stupid as that might sound, it's something that seems to have just withered away with whether it's DEI or any of these new policies that are put in that people look at and go, well, how does that work? You know, it's just that simple common sense that I think people we are very patient people. We if we feel that even if something goes against stuff, if it still makes sense, we are a people that are very much like, oh, okay, well, fair enough. You know, it's when people feel like the game is rigged. That's when people are becoming frustrated. And I just get the sense that Restore, they seem to be on the same page of what I would ideally like the country to look like, a place of common sense, of where if you work hard and you are good at your job or your career or your aspirations, you can achieve that. You're not going to be held down by DEI quotas or anything like that. It's just a what I would consider a traditional Christian setup for this nation. Rightly or wrongly, whether it would turn out to be that or not is a different matter. But that's the impression I'm getting from them. And that is why I'm excited to actually have that. I thought I had that with Reform. That's sort of molded. And I think I mentioned to you before, I was all gung-ho with Advance UK, but that was only because Rupert Lowe he didn't have a political party at the time, and I was so desperate for him to have one. But I thought, well, if he's not going to have one, the next nearest thing that seems to align to how I feel was Ben Habib. And so I thought, okay, well, fine, that is it. But then, of course, Rupert came out, brought his own party, and yeah, okay, I might have switched teams, a bit too quickly, but it's the closest I've got to what I believe in. And I think sometimes you do have to just sort of think, well, what is it I actually want in my country and what I don't want? And then see what people out there, what parties out there seem to marry up the most with that.
Yeah. Okay. Meritocracy. Developing yourself and being held accountable for what you do for yourself and your country, and no one
absolutely
being able to put unfair, unjust authority over individuals, or yeah.
I would like to think if you got particularly good at your job or whatever it is you look into, I would love to think that you would then be in a position where you would then be rewarded for that, whether it was with a new position or a better chance to earn more money or have a better lifestyle, because you've earned it.
You earn it. You earned it. Yeah, you're not placed there because you got a silver spoon round up your ass, or you
absolutely.
I don't know, to fill DEI quotas or some immutable characteristic that you hold. Yeah, absolutely. It's completely unjust and unfair. But that's
I just want this to be. I don't want this to be a racist country, but actually, in my opinion, the DEI quotas and all that is a racist policy, and that actually goes against what I believe. And all the left will say, it's not racist, it's not racist. It's the ultimate example of racism. You won't take this because they're white.
Yeah, this DEI and leftism, it actually causes more racism and more racial discriminatory tensions. Yes. I mean, I found living here in the UK, the most racist, I guess, or race discriminating incidents were probably in London. I live here out here in Wiltshire in southwest England. It's probably 95% white, and nobody's really overtly racist. People they just treat me like they treat everybody else. There's nasty people, there's rude people, just like any other town and city. But yeah, it's the way I interact with people here in this part of England. It's just it's a lot more harmonious, and there's none of this DEI, multiculti, diverse nonsense being shoved into people's heads. Well, there is in workplaces, but other than that, like, nobody views the world like that. So It's just yeah, I'm just done with that all that leftism. We don't need it. But the thing that you were describing about Restore Britain and
Mm,
Rupert Lowe's what his intentions are, I think you've nailed it on the spot. The only thing is, it's not really so much as an issue, but it's
mm.
just that I question the kind of how much Restore can take things. You know, will it reach a
Yes.
point where you hit a political height, but in comparison to culture, you
Mm.
know, spirituality, all of that never gets dragged into the framework for what the country should become,
I
should
guess the
return
only
to.
thing
It's really
is that
Christendom,
yeah, the
back
issues that
to its
we're
historic traditions.
experiencing now didn't just appear overnight. They were a small incremental thing that came in over time, and maybe the counter of that is going to be
It's
small
gonna be small.
incremental
It's
things.
gonna be
Yeah,
difficult, as Rupert Lowe
yeah,
said. It's gonna be hard. It's
yeah.
gonna be a really hard battle. I don't even think things are bad enough. I think things are
Mm,
gonna get a lot worse economically, culturally. Is gonna be a lot more cultural tensions, and maybe even Rupert Lowe. He said in some interviews, it might even be too late. You know,
mm,
the establishment and the institutions, the central banks, they just seeped their way. You know, the in Lord of the Rings terminology, the fires of Isengard, they're burning the trees of the Shire, and they've
mhm,
reached parts of the of Middle Earth that, you know,
mhm,
it's almost a David and Goliath kind of battle. So it's a really we have a really difficult challenge up ahead for
mm,
us. But I wouldn't consider myself a nationalist per se. I'm more of a civilizationist. I think that
mm.
eventually, um, in its preliminary stage of developing and reinvigorating the British spirit of protecting the interests of the nation state and its people, I think the
Mm.
UK has to eventually cooperate with the rest of Europe to defend itself against third world mass migration and the
Yes.
establishment blob. Like if you just go all out isolationist and the UK can, you know, restore itself once again, you're still going to get swallowed up by this globalist establishment. They're so massive. Even people like Donald Trump have been compromised. Not in
Mm.
the same way that Nigel Farage has, but I think Donald Trump, he's not the same as Donald Trump Mark One. You know, where is that America first
Yes.
Donald Trump? He's
Yeah.
become just this globalist political diplomat flying over to Iran and China and Russia and negotiating with countries. You've got problems in America that need to be dealt with, and you know, even the MAGA base are being. I feel like they've been ostracized by the Trump administration.
Well, I
You know,
guess
you
the
have
only thing with
fentanyl.
America is the only thing that I would say about them is that they are very much. I mean, their Republicans are more right wing than our conservatives. In all fairness, um, and you find that in America, with their election cycles, they do tend to flip flop continuously between the two when it comes to elections. So they say Republican, Democrat, because they always seem to forget how bad it was the previous time. If we could somehow have it so that we had successive governments that were at least more right leaning than others, then at least with a continual chipping away at the stone, you would like to think that that's how the culture changes over time. Because if we keep having, I mean, we've had successive conservative and Labour governments who, in all fairness, are both left. They're not right or central even, which is why this environment has been allowed to fester. So, if anything, you almost need the nation to be sort of encouraged to keep voting in more right-leaning parties. They don't have to be right-wing, but more right-leaning, so that eventually the whole narrative starts to shift away from the Zach Polanskis of the world and more into more what I would say common sense.
Yeah. So about this left and right thing, I
Mm,
don't actually perceive things as being left and right. So
right?
when you reference the right wing, it's more. I think what you're referencing is really, uh, you know, in relation to meritocracy, as you were saying, it's more to do with Thatcherism.
mm,
You know, this Thatcherite libertarian. Rupert Lowe is really a Thatcherite libertarian.
mm,
It's not necessary. I don't think it's a good or bad thing. It's
mm,
just that it's not everlasting. It's not long lasting. You know, Thatcherism will not produce a fulfilling civilization that can maintain things in the long term. I think we have to turn back to something that's more transcendental,
mm,
esoteric, that is long lasting and has deep historical roots that taps on the subconscious and has soul in it. You know, after what Margaret Thatcher she did to internationalize this country, it's really opened up London to the central banks, and basically
yeah,
the UK is really just a services based country. Manufacturing
mm,
has been completely destroyed, and it's just the UK is just a kind of an element of the globalist hub. It's there's nothing really, and this goes back to what I talked about in relation to decadence. You know, this is what creates weak societies, is when, you know, a society or a civilization deviates and walks away from its culture, its history, its traditions, and, you know, people are just out for themselves and they
mm,
have no need to care for their communities. So this prolonging or this continuation of Thatcherism, it, it might help in the short term, but the real test is for the country to uplift itself and return back to Christendom, to tradition, and for English heritage to come back as well. You know, that
absolutely.
I don't think ethno-nationalism is really a real word. I think it's just used as a label to smear people and paint
Yes,
them in a bad light.
yeah,
But yeah, in a way, I think England or Britain needs to be more ethno-nationalist, I suppose. Even though that's a bit ironic coming from me when I'm not even Anglo-Saxon. I have
well,
none of this
the thing
ethnicity in
is,
my blood.
right, I would want Hong Kong to be mostly filled with people who look like they genetically come from that area, because
Yeah,
it should do.
it's not a good or bad thing. It's not a good
No,
or evil thing. It's just
no,
natural. I
yes,
just want Britain to return back to its natural, into a kind of a natural order of societal kind of, you know, organization.
mm,
Just
absolutely.
let society fall back into its natural order. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Um, I absolutely hope everything goes well tomorrow at the Unite the Kingdom rally for you, mate. I hope you have the most amazing day as well. I'd love to be able to go, but unfortunately, things always seem to come up that stop me from going. But I will be there in spirit. Okay. Are you going to be doing any kind of streaming or anything like that whilst you're there?
No, no, I won't be because I'm not a journalist. But maybe I'll commentate on it afterwards
Yeah.
and tell everyone about my experiences with the Che Guevara fanatics,
God bless them.
the communist loving tree huggers. Yeah,
Absolutely, and like we said, I would love to have you on a future episode to talk more about the sort of the communist side of things, this Marxism and that. That would be, I think, a really good conversation to have.
but one thing I will comment on: you do have to recognize that these people, they're not doomed to, you know, some kind of existential failure in life. You know, they're real people. They can be
Mm.
transformed. I was once a lefty myself as well. Some people can
Right,
change.
that's it. I'm ending it now. Sorry, I'm ending the conversation immediately. No,
Yeah.
I understand. I
I
understand.
mean, the way Nigel Farage was saying that he'll put detention centers in non-reform councils, it's just that just feeds into more division and segregation. It's terrible, absolutely terrible.
Mad.
He's
Absolutely.
yeah, but
Now,
yeah,
listen. If anyone wants to find you and find your socials, what are your socials, mate? If people want to find you.
yeah, you can just subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go search Guardian Moes. I have a number of other channels, but they're faceless, so and they will stay that way. And you can follow me on X as well, Guardian Moes. I've got my personal email address that you can send inquiries to, and it's available on my channel. But yeah, thanks for having me. And as a side note, I do kind of want to change up the thematics around my channel. So I might take a break. I don't know. My
Right.
channel's going through some dramatic change because right now it's all really kind of reactionary and responsive. It's not really the way that I want. I want to talk more about history and about, you know, stories and and the way that Western civilization is different civilizations around the world have developed. You know, talking more about history and how things have gotten to the way things are.
I think that would be
So,
amazing, and I'd love to be able to see that as well. So, but God bless you. Thank you as much for jumping on. And if you are watching this and you too want to jump on the show, then please get in contact and we can have you on a future episode. But thank you ever so much, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you ever so much.